A new Batman fights crime in a future time. Here's your look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Batman Beyond. Terry McGinnis was just an ordinary teenager until his father was mysteriously killed. Suspecting foul play, Terry meets an older, bitter Bruce Wayne and learns a secret hidden for decades. When Bruce refuses to help, Terry steals and dons a high-tech, tricked-out batsuit in a quest to avenge his father's death as Batman. When it comes to reviewing a brand new Terry McGinnis, I feel there's no better time than the present. Before we get a closer look at the Batman Beyond from DC Multiverse, the first thing we're going to do is figure out how tall the figure stands. I would normally have just taken it right here to the top of his head, but because he's got those points of his cowl that stick further past that point, I'm actually going to take the tape measure very much higher. I'm going to stop it right there. If I am correctly reading this, then Terry McGinnis, the Batman Beyond, stands 7.3 inches in height. We can switch that over to centimeters, revealing that the figure is 18.6, so he's a little over 18.5 centimeters tall. Getting going with a couple of size comparisons, we can bring in some of the other figures we very recently had a look at. There he is next to Green Lantern Corps member John Stewart. John is going to be visibly a lot bigger and bulkier than the more slender, sleeker-looking Batman Beyond, but gives you a good idea. We can also bring in another big, bulky figure. There he is next to the Bizarro. Will say, that head sculpt on Bizarro is growing on me. And then also for a more lankier, proper scale comparison, here he is next to the Death of a Family Nightwing. Love that figure. I'm really actually liking the head sculpt on that Nightwing, but it gives you a good idea, just a rough random grabbing of figures, but it gives you at least an idea of how Batman Beyond's Terry McGinnis looks like when you have him stacked with some of the other figures on your display shelf. Speaking of displaying, I'm happy to report that Batman Beyond's Terry McGinnis does in fact come included with a display flight stand. Not something that makes appearances with many of the DC Multiverse figures, and some have been questionable. The characters that normally would fly didn't come included with flight stands, and yet at least Batman Beyond does. I would definitely be more inclined to display the figure, I think, in flight, especially for the fact he does have the wings, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a second. The figure also comes included with the same stock trading card. Stock would almost even imply that it would be the exact same trading card. It's not. But at least you do get yourself a trading card. And, following it seems a new pattern with a lot of these DC Multiverse figures. They seem to be now going the route of picturing the actual figure instead of actually pulling source material from a cartoon or a comic that Batman Beyond would have come from. I don't know how I feel about this, because at the end of the day, this is figure photography. The whole idea of me getting a trading card, let me just grab John Stewart's for an example so you can see the difference between the two. I get more excited for trading cards that have artwork on them. I get less excited with basically just a photo. Not something I could have taken, but just a photo of a figure seems just less interesting for me for a trading card. And even though I have been really collecting all of these and been putting them in sheet protectors, I kind of feel less interested actually putting this into the sheet. Because again, it's just not using art. It's just a picture of the figures. Anyways, moving that to the side. Flipping this around so you can see the stats on the back. Terry McGinnis is 6 foot exactly, and he's a lean 198 pounds. You can pause the video if you wish, if you'd like to, just to see the back of it. But it's the same read-up I did at the beginning of this review. Just FYI. FYI, though, Batman Beyond does come with a fair share of accessories. We've already talked about the fact he does include the flight stand, of course. And this is a stand we've seen with, I could probably even count it on one hand, how many figures have actually come included with a stand. Some figures that didn't come with stands, I think, would have justified having them. In other cases, like I said, there's probably only been about 4 or 5 figures that have actually come included with these stands. But you can take it. It's adjustable, so you can bring this back and forth, and as you'll see as well, as I'm moving this back and forth, it sits on a ratcheted joint, so all the joint stays tight. I wish more companies would do this with stands, because half the time the stands just end up flopping loosey-goosey. No loosey-goosey happening here, though. You can't rotate it this way, which is the one thing I wish it could have actually possessed, but it does also open and close, and there's your waist clip right there. So between the two, you can bring this back and forth, And again, that opening and close like this. I feel like the stand should be able to twist. There we go. It was just a little on the tight side. I would certainly want to have it sitting more on an angle, but just perseverance. There we go. Finally loosened it up. It was just a little on the tighter side. Go ahead and take the figure, though. You may want to, for this, move the wings out of the way. We'll talk more about the wings in a second. There we go. And then you can go ahead and just clamp that onto the waist clip. It actually helps a little bit if you bring it further past the point of his belt, just because it's a little more of a firmer grip. And then, there you go. You've got yourself, admittingly not the most exciting of poses, but at least to show you guys that you can display him in a flight position, which is probably what I'm going to do when it comes to displaying the figure. I just really like the fact that they included the wings that can attach to his arms. I know I'm sort of already kind of giving stuff away about the character, but yeah, just really like the fact that you've got that. Technically, though, as well, you could really just remove the neck completely. Although I will say, once it gets in there, it's much harder to remove, and he does have at least a peg there. So if you want to just have him standing on the stand, you can do that instead. I'm going to put that to the side. Terry, let's just bring his wings down here. There we go. Put the figure back down. He comes with a couple of accessories. We can have a look at it right now. He comes with what I would be considering a rather thick-looking Batarang. Does this ever bring back memories of looking at that first Detective Comics Batman, like the first figure I looked at from the DC Multiverse line. And I even commented back then that the Batarang was awfully thick. Well, things have not changed. As you can see, the Batarang here, though done in red, it is still a very thick-looking Batarang to have displayed with the figure. Currently, you can sit this in one of his hands, but the hand is a little on the loose side. Fear not, though. They also include some swappable hands as well. And these hands are actually better suited for the job of holding the Batarang in his hand. This probably makes a little bit more sense displaying it like that. Again, I really have to ask the question of why the Batarang has to be so thick. Maybe it's just more safety precautions if this is something that's going to be hitting regular retail and not considered a specialty figure, where they can kind of dodge around having to have accessories slightly smaller and slightly thinner. Maybe for safety precautions, the Batarang had to be thicker like this. I don't know. It is a little on the thick side, I will say. I don't even know how that would be easy for him to throw around. To also show you how to swap out the hands. Although, you know, admittingly, I'm probably going to end up just keeping these hands because I just love the fact that they almost look like claws. He's got talons. But if you want to remove the hands, all you're simply just going to do is grab the forearm here, wiggle it off the very large to remove peg, and just pop the replacement hand in place. If it helps at all, you can also twist this onto the peg, and then he's got the swappable hand. The other accessory he comes included with, parting again the banging in the background here, if you look at the underside of the figure, normally what you would expect to see is peg holes on the undersides of his feet. But they also serve a purpose beyond the point of just a display base, because he also comes included with these flames. The flames attach only in one peg hole right there. So when you attach these, what they're basically doing is they're mock filling in that little hold area here. You'll see what I mean in a second. Just fit this into place like that. And it does a pretty close enough job. I almost would have even made the flame a little bit wider so it would have fit right into that hole. But honestly, the way you're going to be looking at it, you're probably going to have the figure displayed like this. Is anyone really going to tilt the figure around to see that he doesn't line up to those holes? I don't know. Maybe you may have a friend that's particular like that. You can go do the exact same thing on the other side. Just take the plug, peg, and drive that into the holes like that. And you've got jet propulsion. That's neat. Let's go ahead and remove those now and put those to the side. And we'll have a closer look here at Terry McGinnis, the Batman Beyond. There is technically, as far as I know, there's two Batman Beyond variations. One is this one, which has the visible mouth. That's a little bit more closer to his cartoon and comic counterpart. But then there's also one that has a shield plate that goes across his face. I think the rest of the figure stays the same, and I think the only difference between the two is the fact that it does have the swappable head sculpt. And honest speaking, I don't know if I'm actually going to ever pick up that other figure, because honestly, this is the way I would want to have my Batman Beyond, with the mouth you can see right there. I can understand, based on the molding being something that's very unique to this particular character, yeah, then McFarlane would probably get a little more mileage out of the figure by releasing one with a variant head sculpt. Short of maybe just picking up the figure just simply only to review, and probably more just to settle on the idea of having him displayed with the mouth head sculpt there, which, as you can see, looks very nice. It has a few additional panel lines that may not have been there in the original cartoon. A little more visible on the comic Batman Beyond, which would have branched off from the cartoon from there. But I like that it still keeps current and keeps to the same notion of what Batman Beyond should really look like. It doesn't change it too drastically. Whatever the few little panel lines that actually are on the figure's costume, it's kept very minimal, actually. And I like that this figure is very slim, sleek, and slender. Let's talk a little bit about these wings here. So they're softer plastic wings. You can see there's a little bit of give to them. And they attach to the top there. There's a plug that actually has the two overlapping one another and fitting to the back of the figure's torso. All you have to do, you can first of all just display them like this. But if you want to have them fanned out, just bring them out like this on both sides. One thing I have noticed is as you move the other one gets a little more stubborn, like it doesn't want to go along for it. But you'll also see that there's slots on both sides. There's one there, and of course there's one right there as well. All you have to do is take the figure's arms, and on the sides, of course, you got your regular gauntlet blades, but on the back, he actually has a secondary peg, or a third peg, I suppose. You can then bring the wings up, bring the arms up to line up to the wings. And then you're just going to bring the arms around, make sure you're spinning them around so they line up, and you're just going to take that little peg point and slot it into that opening right there. And it's secure, it's staying in there, it's not going to be going anywhere. And then just simply rinse and repeat. Again, just line the peg up there, lining it into the slot, plug it into place, and there you got Terry McGinnis with his wings spread like this. Maybe I would have only done differently painting the back of the wings black, so it wasn't all just red. Because on the cartoon, usually it was like red on the inside, and I believe black on the outside. I would have probably, again, painted that. But it's a nice touch to see that they would have included that. And even when you do detach the wings, that little peg doesn't bother me at all because I just feel it looks like it goes with the rest of the gauntlet blades. And again, you just detach it on both sides like this. Bring the wings back down. There we go. For me, personally, I would likely display the figure with the wings out. But again, in a case like this, I'm glad to see that they made it so that you can bring the wings out if you want to, and then even on top of that, attach it to the forearms to make them just a little bit more secure. As for the rest of the figure's body, there's very little paint happening here. So much of it is just the black molded plastic, and I really don't feel like there had to be a chance there to paint things in. Maybe, if anything, the gauntlet blades have been painted a darker black, so it's a little more of a darker shade than the rest of it. Especially his blades here seem like it's the darkest of all the black around it. Of course, obviously, the emblem has been painted in a crimson red, and the same can be said for the utility belt, though it's not the same red as the chest emblem. Talk a little bit first about the emblem. I do like the rich color of red that they decided to go with. Perhaps, if anything, I would say maybe the emblem is a little too high on his chest, especially the wings literally just touching the corners of his shoulders. The utility belt isn't the same red, which kind of is a little on the disappointing side. It seems to me, at least, that they tried to match the color closer to being the plastic of his wings because it seems more like a darker pink color and less the crimson red that they went with the chest emblem. Paint here, for the most part, is pretty good. I would say if anything suffers it, it's the utility belt, but just a little bit. I mean, you can see a little bit of the black has bled onto it, or maybe this would be a case where not nearly enough of the red has been painted. There's a little bit of the red flicked onto the top of one of the silver squares. And as we flip the wings up, you can see sort of the back side of it as well. Again, I wish this color here was maybe a little bit more closer to this color up at the top, so there was that consistent red across the board. But again, when you're looking at the rest of the body, very little paint actually happens here. And you'll see there's very little panel lining happening here as well. If anything, there's more sculpting going on in the gauntlet than there is on the rest of his body. This is actually a successful example, I feel, of a character that didn't need a whole lot of panel lining. One of my, not necessarily problems with the John Stewart, but certainly one thing I mentioned when we looked at that figure was I felt like he had a whole lot of panel lining to break up. And that isn't necessarily always a bad thing. It worked for John Stewart. I think too much panel lining would have disrupted the look of the character for Batman Beyond. Yeah, sure, you can keep it on the face, and I think it works well on the face, but I feel like just leave it off for the rest of his body, and I'm glad to see that they did do that. Again, I really like the sculpting of the hands. I think after this review, I'm just going to probably pop this hand back off and replace it with the one that's got the more sharp claws. But again, he's very sleek. He's very slender. Even like when you're looking at his feet, how they form these sharp pointed tips to the ends. And they have some really nice sculpting on the interior. Now, these do also have some toe articulation, which we'll talk more about in a second when we look at the figure's articulation. Overall, again, I like the proportions on this character. Paint what little you see of it is handled, I think, generally pretty good. But again, I probably would have darkened the color of utility belt to match closer the color of the emblem there. But overall, I'm really, really happy with this one. I really feel less and less interested in wanting to pick up the variant that had the mouth plate, because this seems so much more like Batman Beyond to me. Let's have a look at the posability on Batman Beyond. His head rotates all the way around, and you can also hinge it up and hinge it down, as well as back and forth as well. The only downside, though, is by the sculpting of the back of his head like this, you can't reach his head further back. So if you want to have him on a display on that flight stand, and of course bring the wings out, you really can't bring his head any point past this point here. Sure, yeah, you can have it looking down really low, super low, but unfortunately you can't bring the head any further past this point. The arms bring out beyond the point. Oh, I see what I did there. That's kind of clever. Beyond the point of a 90-degree angle bend. You can also bring the arms all the way around. He has a socket joint on the inside of his torso, so that also allows the arms to hinge forward, hinge forward as well. You can also bring them further back than what you normally would be able to. He does have a bicep swivel. You can swivel that all the way around. He has 2 points of articulation on the elbow. There's one and the second one right there. He doesn't have any articulation here on the gauntlet because it's just sculpted the rest of his forearm. But you can rotate his hands all the way around, and you can also hinge them back and forth also. Let's get those arms down. Just want to make sure I've got the hinge joint happening the right way, because I really don't want to force the opposite direction, because you know what would ultimately happen. Upper torso is on a ball joint. He also has a lower torso ball joint as well. And then for his legs split out. I'm noticing while I'm doing this, and why do I always feel so compelled to draw everyone's attention to his crotch? I don't know if you can hear that or not. But again, he's got these ratchet joints on the insides of his legs to ensure the longevity of these legs, that they're not going to develop looseness over time. DC Direct, I really wish you had taken notice. The legs go back and forth like this. You can swivel at the top cut of the thigh. It's a double hinge on the knee. Foot articulation allows him to move back and forth this way. You can also ankle pivot. And going back to the point that I mentioned earlier as we look at his pointed feet, yes, Batman Beyond also does have toe articulation as well. I'm happy with how this figure really did turn out. McFarlane, as of late, it seems, is really getting on board the idea of re-releasing figures with multiple swappable different heads. Sometimes it's really just the bodies that are staying the exact same. Some of figures that we will be looking at in upcoming reviews. Again, it boils down to the head, and that's what he's ultimately done here with also the Batman Beyond. There's 2 versions as far as I know. There may even be 3. This one, the more traditional look for Terry McGinnis, the Batman Beyond. And then there's the one that has sort of an Optimus Prime faceplate. I don't personally get that. And I probably won't even personally get that either for my personal collection, or even probably to review on this channel, because, again, I feel like this is the superior looking Batman Beyond, and the other one is just somewhat of an inferior Batman Beyond, if you ask me. The frequency for a new Batman Beyond figure tends not to be very high. So whenever we do get a new release of this character, we tend to take notice because it doesn't happen very often. I can probably even count on one hand how many figure lines have actually released a Batman Beyond Terry McGinnis. And sad to report, a lot of the times when we get a new Batman Beyond, it usually is just them using the same mold as all the rest of the figures in the wave, and they're just, of course, painting it all in jet black and giving them a brand new head sculpt. Terry McGinnis really shouldn't look like the rest of the figures from the wave, because a Terry McGinnis character is sleek. He's slender. He's trimmed. You really want the character to have a really skinny proportion, similar to Spider-Man. I'm happy to report, of course, in the course of this review you guys saw as well, that McFarlane Toys sculpted from scratch a brand new body for Terry McGinnis. And I'm glad to see that they did, because he shouldn't be the same build as a John Stewart, and he certainly shouldn't be the exact same build as a regular Batman figure. I do like the proportions on this character. Again, really trimmed body. He does have the nice touch of having the extendable out wings that, of course, attach to the ends of his arms, and that's also a nice touch as well. And, you know, even though it's all positive praise that I'm saying for this character, there's only very subtle changes I would have made, like maybe painting the back of his wings black so the interior of his wings still remained that nice crimson red. Maybe having his utility belt the same color as his emblem, so there was some consistency there. And the fact that he's got this it looks like Texas toast. He's got a Batarang that looks like it's been made out of Texas toast. I probably would have made that a little bit thinner, but I don't really know the circumstances as to why those Batarangs have to be so thick in the first place. Maybe it's due to a choking hazard or some other reason, again, I'm not aware of. I wish the Batarang was just a little on the thinner side. Other than that, though, I'm really happy with how this one turned out. And as I did say in this review, there is more than one Batman Beyond circulating right now online and in stores. There's this one, and then there's the one that's got that, I don't know, Optimus Prime faceplate. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for, I feel, Batman Beyond. It certainly doesn't work for my own personal collection. If anything, I may, if I find one at a good price, pick it up and maybe just do a review of it. But for me, this is the definitive looking Batman Beyond I'm very much looking forward to putting on shelf and on display. And this isn't the end of Batman in the not so distant future. As certainly alluded by Todd McFarlane and showing some images already online, we are going to be getting an expanded universe, a DC multiverse, containing characters from the Batman Beyond cartoon. I hope at certainly at some point we're going to get ourselves an Ink. That's just my own personal interest character I would like to see as a figure release. Ink. I think that would be fun. But let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think of Batman Beyond, whether you've picked this figure up for yourself, whether you've picked up both variants of this figure. Let me know down below in the comments section. If you guys are also new to this channel and enjoying all the content you're seeing, don't miss the boat, as they say. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you turn on the bell notification. And do yourself the service of coming back to this channel regularly to make sure that you're not missing out on any new content that's popping up. Of course, we are going to be wrapping up this review, but just know as well that we will be continuing our journeys with the DC Multiverse figure reviews. There's definitely going to be a lot coming your way, so make sure, yes, you're coming back to this channel on a regular basis. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.